47 confirmed kills before she turned 30. They called her the Angel of Sonora, but here's what no one knew: 12 of those kills were mercy.
Do you think
Soldiers
that
begging
rifle
for
scares
death,
me?
bodies
It
too
should.
broken to save. She pulled the trigger so they wouldn't have to suffer. Now, 10 years later, the brother of one of those soldiers has found her, and he's coming for revenge. Before we begin, if you enjoy stories about redemption, justice, and impossible choices, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Where are you watching from right now? I'd love to know. This is the story of Catherine Sullivan and the price of mercy. The sound came first, not thunder, not the crack of lightning splitting Montana sky, just the sharp, clean report of a Winchester rifle cutting through the evening air like a blade through silk. James Sullivan's hammer stopped mid-swing, the nail half driven into the barn door frame. Dust hung suspended in the amber light of late January, each particle catching the dying sun. The echo rolled across Brennan Ridge, bouncing off the pine-covered mountains before fading into the valleys below. That wasn't hunting. Jamie knew hunting. He'd heard enough rifles in his 45 years to distinguish purpose from accident, necessity from violence. This was something else. 5 riders appeared through the haze, their horses dark shapes against the setting sun. A woman rode ahead of them, bent low over her saddle, her hair streaming behind her like a torn flag. 4 men pursued. Their guns spoke again, muzzle flashes bright in the gathering dusk. Jamie turned toward the house. Catherine stood in the doorway, one hand already gripping the Winchester Model 1873 that leaned against the frame. The rifle she'd sworn never to touch again. The rifle that had earned her a name she'd spent 10 years trying to forget. Their eyes met across 30 yards of Montana dirt. In that single glance, Jamie saw the woman she'd been before him, before this ranch, before peace. He saw Angel of Sonora, the sharpshooter, whose legend still whispered through saloons from Mexico to Canada. The woman who could put a bullet through a playing card at 200 yards. The woman who'd counted 47 kills before she was 30. The woman he'd convinced to put down the gun. "Kate, don't," he started. The wild shot from the pursuing riders struck the porch post. Wood splintered. The fleeing woman's horse stumbled, and she fell hard, rolling twice before coming to rest just inside their gate. She didn't move. Catherine didn't speak. She stepped onto the porch boots, solid on sun-bleached planks. The Winchester came up to her shoulder with the smooth, terrible familiarity of muscle memory that never truly fades. Her body remembered what her mind had tried to forget. The crack of her rifle was different from the wild shooting. Precise, final, certain. 200 yards away, one of the pursuing riders jerked backward, as if yanked by invisible rope. He toppled from his saddle, hit the ground, and went still. Jamie closed his eyes. 10 years of peace had just ended in the space between one heartbeat and the next. The remaining 3 riders reined in hard, their horses rearing. They stared at the porch, at the woman who stood there with smoke curling from her barrel. Then they turned and rode hard for the horizon, their companion's body left behind in the dust. The silence that followed was somehow louder than the gunfire. Jamie walked slowly toward his wife. Kate stood motionless, the rifle still shouldered, still aimed at the empty space where the riders had been. Her hands, he noticed, were shaking now. Not before, not during, only after. "Kate," he said softly. She lowered the rifle. Her face was pale, her eyes distant. When she finally looked at him, he saw the woman he'd married and the ghost of the soldier she'd been, both present in the same moment. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." The woman at the gate moaned, still alive then. Jamie ran to her, his medical training overriding everything else. Her breathing was shallow, rapid. Broken ribs, probably. Maybe internal bleeding. He needed to get her inside. But first he looked back at the body lying in the road. First blood on their land in a decade. The count that Kate had frozen at 47 had just become 48. And Jamie Sullivan knew with the certainty of a man who'd seen too much war that this was only the beginning. The image froze. The moment crystallized. Then time folded backward, rewinding through the months to a simpler morning when the only sounds were birdsong and the gentle hiss of wind through grass. 6 months earlier, July 1883. Summer lived differently on Brennan Ridge. The heat came gentle here, not the brutal hammer of the southern plains, but a warm hand that ripened hay and sweetened water. The Sullivan Ranch sat in a valley between two pine slopes protected from the worst of Montana's temper by geography and good fortune. Jamie worked in the small paddock behind the barn, his hands careful on the injured horse's leg. The mare belonged to his neighbor, a wire cut across her foreleg that had become infected. The smell of iodine and carbolic soap mixed with the scent of fresh-cut lumber and wild sage. "You a veterinarian, Mr. Sullivan?" The voice belonged to Wyatt Whitmore, the 19-year-old son of their neighbor Sarah. The boy watched with the intense focus of youth trying to understand the world through observation. Jamie smiled without looking up. His fingers probed the wound, feeling for heat, for the telltale swelling of poison spreading through tissue. "I was an Army medic, Wyatt, but the principles are the same. You save lives by understanding how bodies work. Horseman doesn't matter much. Blood flows the same. Pain feels the same. Healing follows the same rules." He cleaned the wound with steady hands, the same hands that had once worked in hospital tents while bullets whistled overhead. The same hands that had saved some men and held others while they died. "You see a lot of hurt folks in the war." Jamie's hands paused just for a moment, then continued their work. "More than I wanted to. Fewer than I wish I could have." The answer seemed to satisfy the boy. Wyatt watched in silence as Jamie bandaged the leg, his movements economical, practiced. When he finished, the horse stood calmer, the wild fear gone from her eyes. "There. She'll heal clean if you keep it dry and change the dressing every 2 days. Can you do that?" "Yes, sir." "Good man." The sun had climbed toward noon when Catherine appeared at the paddock fence, a basket in her hands. She wore a simple dress the color of creek stone, her dark hair pulled back, practical against the heat. At 43, she moved with the quiet grace of someone who'd learned to be aware of space, of distance, of angles. Even now, even at peace, she calculated without thinking. "Brought lunch," she said. Her voice carried the faint rasp of someone who'd spent years not speaking much, who'd learned that silence was often safer than words. They walked together to the small creek that bordered their property, found their usual spot beneath a cottonwood that had been old when Montana was young. They ate in comfortable quiet, the kind of silence that comes only after years of knowing someone well enough that words become optional. Kate finished her bread and cheese, then spoke suddenly as if the thought had been building and finally broke free. "You remember the first day we met?" Jamie looked at her surprised. They didn't often talk about those days. The past was a locked room they'd both agreed not to enter. "Hospital tent? Mexico. You shot 3 raiders who were trying to rob our medical supplies. I was in the middle of surgery on Lieutenant Morris and couldn't leave the table. You walked in and with that Winchester still smoking, looked at me like you were asking permission to save my life." Kate smiled, a rare expression that transformed her face from handsome to beautiful. "You were the first person who didn't look at me like I was a monster. Everyone else they'd see, the kills, the reputation. You saw someone who was afraid. I saw a woman doing what needed to be done to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. That's not monster. That's soldier." She leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. This close, he could feel the tension that never quite left her body, the coiled spring of someone always ready to move, to react, to survive. "You saved me, Jamie. Not that day, but every day after." He kissed the top of her head, said nothing. Some truths didn't need words. The afternoon stretched long and lazy, the kind of day that feels eternal, even as it passes. By the time they walked back to the house, the sun had started its slow descent toward the western peaks. The rider came just as shadows began to pool in the low places. Jamie saw him first, a lone horseman approaching at an easy pace. Not hurried, not threatening, just purposeful. The blue uniform marked him as Army, a dispatch rider, making his rounds through the scattered homesteads. "Mail for James Sullivan," the rider called, still 20 yards out. Jamie walked to meet him, signed for the letter. The paper was thick, official. The seal was from the territorial governor's office in Helena. His hands suddenly felt cold despite the summer heat. "Thank you, soldier." The rider tipped his hat and turned his horse back toward the road. Jamie stood holding the envelope, not wanting to open it. Kate appeared beside him, silent question in her eyes. He broke the seal, read. His face went pale. "What is it?" Kate asked. Jamie didn't answer immediately. He read the letter again, as if repetition might change the words. Then he looked toward the mountains, toward the vast, empty distance where a man could lose himself if he had reason. Someone is looking for me after 10 years. Who? Someone I didn't think was still alive. Kate waited. She'd learned patience in the years since they'd married, learned that Jamie would tell her when he was ready. But the set of his shoulders, the way he held himself, told her this wasn't simple news. His name is Cole Hardin, Jamie said finally. His brother was Eli Hardin. Kate went very still. The name hung between them like smoke from a discharged weapon. The boy, she said. Not a question. The boy. They stood together as the sun touched the mountains and the light turned gold, then amber, then the color of old blood. Neither spoke. The letter in Jamie's hand felt heavier than paper had any right to feel. Inside the house later after the sun had gone and the lamps were lit, they sat at the scarred kitchen table. Kate's hands wrapped around a cup of coffee gone cold. Jamie held the letter reading it for the fourth time. Tell me, Kate said. Cole Hardin has been searching for us. For you specifically. The letter says he's acquired mineral rights across Montana. Buying up land, making claims. Legal, all of it. But the people who refuse to sell to him have a way of experiencing accidents. And now he's found us. According to this, he'll be in Brennan Ridge by the end of summer. He's sent word ahead. Wants to discuss a business proposition. Kate's laugh was bitter. Business. That's what we're calling revenge now. Jamie set the letter down, met her eyes. In the lamplight, he could see the fine lines that had appeared around her mouth and eyes over the past decade. Lines from smiling, from squinting at sun, from living a life that didn't require constant vigilance. Lines he'd been grateful to see appear because they meant she was healing. Kate, do you remember what really happened with Eli Hardin? Of course I remember. I've never forgotten a single one. Then you remember he didn't die because you shot to kill. She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was steady but soft. He was good shot. Some raid on a supply depot. By the time we found him, the wound had gone septic. He was maybe 22, Jamie. Still had mother's letters in his pocket. He was dying and he knew it. Jamie nodded. 3 days if we'd done nothing. 3 days of fever and pain and his insides rotting. No morphine left. No laudanum. Nothing to ease it. So I eased it another way. The words hung in the air like confession. 47 confirmed kills. Kate continued, her voice taking on the flat quality of someone reciting facts to avoid feeling them. 12 of those were mercy, soldiers too far gone to save dying in agony. You'd examine them, do your doctor's assessment, then look at me. And I'd do what needed doing. Because I couldn't, Jamie said. Army medic's oath. First, do no harm. I could save lives, but I couldn't end suffering, even when ending it was the mercy. So I asked you to carry that burden from me. You didn't ask, I volunteered. Same difference. Kate stood and walked to the window. Outside, the Montana night was vast and dark, studded with stars that seemed close enough to touch. Cole Hardin doesn't know any of this. He just knows his baby brother died and I pulled the trigger. The rest, the context, the mercy of it, that doesn't matter to a man looking for someone to blame. Which is why we need to tell him. Explain. Kate turned from the window and Jamie saw something in her face that made his heart sink. It was the expression she'd worn in those old days when she'd been soldier instead of wife. Hard. Certain. Resigned to what was coming. You think Cole Hardin is going to sit down and listen to our explanation? You think a man who's spent years building resources to find us wants understanding? I think we have to try. Kate, we made a promise. No more violence. We walked away from that life. That life is riding toward us, whether we want it or not. They stood in the lamplight, husband and wife, former soldier and former medic, two people who'd found peace together, and Sa watched it approach its end. Jamie crossed the room, took Kate's hands in his. We'll find another way. There's always another way. Kate squeezed his hands but said nothing. She'd seen too much war to believe that anymore. The next morning broke clear in Cole's summer, not quite ready to surrender to autumn. Jamie rode into Brennan Ridge, the small town that served the scattered ranches and homesteads dotting the valley. The settlement was barely 10 years old, still raw around the edges, still deciding what it wanted to become. He found Marshal Thomas Reed in the small office that served as both jail and courthouse. Reed sat behind a desk built from pine planks, reading a letter with the kind of focus that suggested bad news. Jamie Sullivan, been a while. Thomas, I need your help. Reed gestured to the chair across from his desk. He was 58 now, his hair more silver than brown, his face carved by decades of trying to impose law on a land that barely acknowledged the concept. He'd been a captain when Jamie knew him in Mexico before war injuries forced him into a different kind of service. This about Cole Hardin, Jamie's surprise must have shown on his face because Reed smiled without humor. I'm a marshal, Jamie. My job is knowing when trouble's coming to my territory. And Cole Hardin is trouble with a law degree and a bankroll. What do you know about him? Reed pulled out a folder spread papers across the desk. Maps, deeds, legal documents stamped with official seals. Cole Hardin is 40, Yale educated, inherited a fortune from his father's railroad investments. Lost his only brother in the Mexican campaigns. Spent the last decade acquiring land across Montana territory, all perfectly legal. Hires good lawyers, pays good money, follows the law right up to the moment it becomes inconvenient. And then people who stand in his way experience unfortunate accidents. Houses burn, livestock die. Sometimes people fall down mine shafts or get trampled by horses. Always accidental. Never quite enough evidence to prosecute. Reed leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking under his weight. 3 months ago, he started asking questions about you and Kate. Hired Pinkerton men to trace military records. Found out about Sonora. Found out about Eli. Jamie felt something cold settle in his stomach. How much does he know? Enough to hate you, not enough to understand why. Reed pulled out another document, this one older edges worn soft with handling. There's something else. This is a deed registration from 1881. When you got sick with pneumonia, Kate took out a loan against the mineral rights under your ranch. $500 to pay for medicine and the doctor from Helena. Kate never told me, because she paid it back within the year. Worked herself half to death, but she cleared the debt. Property was free and clear again. So what's the problem? Reed's face was grim. The problem is that Cole Hardin just bought that old debt from the bank. Legally, according to the original contract, he now owns the mineral exploration rights to everything under your ranch. Jamie stared at the document. The words made sense individually, but refused to form coherent meaning together. That's impossible. The debt was paid. The bank claims there was a clerical error. The cancellation was never properly filed. So technically, according to territorial law, the debt still exists. And Hardin owns it. That's fraud. Probably, but proving it? That takes time, lawyers' money, things most ranchers don't have, which is exactly how Hardin operates. He buries people in legal procedure until they give up or go broke. Jamie sat back, mind racing. This wasn't just about revenge for a dead brother. This was calculated, planned business. What do I do? Reed was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood, walked to the window, looked out at the street where horses stood patient at hitching posts and dust devils spun lazy circles. You could fight him in court, could take years, cost everything you have, might win, probably won't. Or you could sell, take what he offers and start somewhere new, somewhere he won't follow. Jamie stood as well, anger rising hot in his chest. That's not an option. Then you better prepare for a long, expensive fight. And Jamie, Reed turned from the window. Whatever you do, make sure Kate keeps that rifle in the cabin. Hardin would love nothing more than to provoke you into violence. Give him legal grounds for self-defense. Then he takes everything. Jamie left the marshal's office with the weight of knowledge heavy on his shoulders. The morning sun seemed harsher now, the town somehow smaller. He stopped at the general store for supplies, then at the small medical office that served the scattered population. Dr. Malcolm Pierce had arrived in Brennan Ridge 6 months earlier, a quiet man in his early 50s who kept to himself and asked few questions. He dispensed medicine with competent hands and charged fair prices. No one knew much about him beyond that. Mr. Sullivan, here for Mrs. Sullivan's tonic. The medical office was clean, orderly, smelling of carbolic and dried herbs. Pierce stood behind a counter measuring powder into small paper packets. Yes, the inflammation medicine. Pierce prepared the order with practiced efficiency, but he kept glancing at Jamie as if wanting to ask something, but holding back. You were Army Medical Corps, weren't you? Pierce said finally. During the Mexican campaigns? I was. Did you know a Captain Marcus Webb? He commanded a hospital unit near Sonora. Jamie searched his memory. The name felt familiar, but war had been chaos. Hundreds of faces, most forgotten. I don't recall specifically. Why? Pierce's smile didn't reach his eyes. No reason. He was a friend. I wondered if your paths had crossed. There was something off in the man's tone, something that made Jamie's instincts prickle. But he couldn't identify what. He paid for the medicine, thanked the doctor, and left with the strange feeling of being watched. The ride back to the ranch took him through the Whitmore property. Sarah Whitmore was hanging laundry, her son Wyatt chopping wood near the small cabin. She waved as Jamie passed, and he reined in, exchanging pleasantries. That's when Sarah mentioned the letter. Mr. Sullivan, I hope you don't mind me asking, but did you receive any correspondence from someone named Hardin? Jamie's stomach tightened. I did. Why? Sarah's hands twisted in her apron, the gesture of someone trying to contain fear. Because we got one too, 3 days ago. Mr. Hardin made an offer to purchase our property. A fair offer, actually. More than the land is worth. But you're not selling. This is all we have. My husband built this place before he died. It's Wyatt's inheritance. Where would we go? Wyatt had stopped chopping, was listening now. The boy's jaw was set, his hands tight on the axe handle. The letter said if we don't accept within 30 days, he can't guarantee our safety. That accidents happen, that it would be unfortunate if something happened to a widow and her son. Jamie felt rage kindle hot behind his ribs. Did you show this to Marshal Reed? I did. He said the letter doesn't technically threaten anything, just expresses concern for our safety, not enough for legal action. That's horseshit, and everyone knows it. I know, but knowing doesn't change anything. Jamie looked from Sarah to Wyatt, saw the fear they were trying to hide. This family had nothing to do with Mexico or Eli Hardin or ancient history. They were just in the way of whatever Cole Hardin wanted. Mrs. Whitmore, you're not alone in this. Hardin wants to come after people in this valley. He's going to find it harder than he expects. Mr. Sullivan, we can't ask you to fight our battles. You're not asking, I'm offering. Wyatt stepped forward, the axe still in his hands. I can fight, Mr. Sullivan. I'm not afraid. I know you're not, but there's different kinds of fighting, son. Sometimes the bravest thing is protecting what matters instead of proving how tough you are. The words were as much for himself as for the boy. Jamie rode home as the sun began its afternoon descent. He found Kate in the garden behind the house tending the small plot where they grew vegetables. She stood when she saw his face, knew immediately that the news was bad. He told her everything. The mineral rights, the legal trap, Sarah Whitmore's letter, Dr. Pierce's odd questions. Kate listened without interrupting, her face growing harder with each detail. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she walked to the house, came back with the Winchester. She set it on the ground between them. We can't fight him with words, Jamie. We can't fight him with that either. That's exactly what he wants. The what do we do? Wait for him to take everything. Wait until someone gets hurt. We find proof of the fraud. We expose him legally. We beat him the right way. Kate laughed, the sound bitter. You still believe in right ways. After everything we've seen. I have to, because if I don't, then what was it all for? All those years, all those people we saved, if we just become what we fought against, what was the point? They stood in the afternoon light, the Winchester between them like a line drawn in dust. 10 years of peace on one side, the old life on the other. I love you, Kate said, but you're wrong about this. Cole Hardin isn't going to be stopped by law. Men like him write the law to suit themselves. Then we change the law. With what hope? With truth, with community, with being better than he is. Kate picked up the Winchester, held it like she'd held 1,000 times before. Comfortable, natural, wrong. I'll try it your way, Jamie. But when it doesn't work, when people start getting hurt, I'm not going to stand by and watch. If it comes to that, we'll face it together. She nodded, but the doubt in her eyes cut him deeper than any blade. 3 days later, as evening painted the valley in shades of amber and gold, Jamie was finishing repairs on the barn door. The sound of approaching horses made him look up. 5 riders, coming fast, not from the road, but from the wooded trail that cut through the northern section of their property. Trespassers, then. Jamie set down his tools, walked toward the fence line. He didn't have a weapon, hadn't carried one in years, but he was on his own land, and these men were where they had no right to be. The lead rider was a broad-shouldered man in his mid-30s, his face weathered by sun and violence. Three more riders flanked him, hired muscle by the look of them. The fifth rider was younger, barely 20, nervous eyes scanning the ranch like he was looking for threats. James Sullivan. That's right, you're on private property. The lead rider smiled without warmth. Name's Bram Calder. I work for Mr. Cole Harden. He'd like a word with you. Then Mr. Harden can come himself, during daylight, through the front gate, like civilized people. I don't think you understand. This isn't a request. One of the riders, a thin man with a scarred face, let his hand drift toward the pistol at his belt. Not drawing, just resting there. A promise of what could happen. Jamie felt his pulse quicken, but kept his voice steady. And I don't think you understand. This is my land. You're not welcome. Leave. Bram's expression hardened. Last chance, Sullivan. Come peaceful and have a conversation. Or we take you anyway, and it's less pleasant. The thin man's fingers wrapped around his pistol grip. The shot came from behind Jamie from the house. The crack of the Winchester was sharp, final, unmistakable. The thin man screamed as the bullet took him through the hand, the pistol flying from his ruined grip to land in the dirt. Jamie spun. Kate stood on the porch, the rifle to her shoulder, smoke curling from the barrel. Her face was calm, her eyes cold, her stance perfect. Angel of Sonora returned from whatever grave she'd tried to bury her in. Next one who reaches for a gun loses more than a hand, she called across the distance. Bram Calder stared at her, recognition dawning slowly on his face. Jesus Christ, you're her. You're the Angel of Sonora. Kate didn't answer. She worked the lever action, chambered another round. The sound was loud in the sudden silence. Your friend needs a doctor. I suggest you take him to town. Now. The injured man was sobbing, cradling his shattered hand. Blood ran between his fingers, dripped into the dust. The other riders had gone pale, their hands carefully away from their weapons. Bram met Kate's eyes across the distance. What he saw there made him nod slowly. This was supposed to be a conversation. You just made it a war. It was always going to be a war. Now you know what you're fighting. The riders turned their horses, the injured man swaying in his saddle. Before they left, Bram called back one more time. Mr. Harden just wanted to talk. But you shot first, remember that. Then they were gone, riding hard for town dust rising behind them. Jamie turned to his wife. She stood motionless on the porch, the rifle still shouldered, still ready. Her hands, he noticed, were steady. Rock steady. Not even a tremor. Kate, he said. She lowered the rifle, looked at him, and he saw in her eyes something that terrified him more than any threat from Cole Harden. She'd enjoyed it, just for a moment, just a flash, but she'd felt alive again, doing what she did best. I'm sorry, she whispered, but they both knew the apology came too late. The first shot had been fired, the line had been crossed, and there was no going back. That night, they barely spoke. Kate cleaned the Winchester with ritualistic care, and the old habits returning like unwelcome friends. Jamie sat at the table, staring at nothing, trying to find some path forward that didn't end in blood. We could leave, he said finally. Take what we can carry. Start over. And go where? How far do we have to run before the past stops following? As far as it takes. Kate set down the rifle, came to sit across from him. The lamplight cast shadows across her face, made her look older, tired. I broke my promise to you. I said no more violence. And the first moment I was tested, I failed. You protected me. I could have fired a warning shot, could have aimed for his shoulder, but I went for the hand, the shot that says I could have killed you, the shot that proves I'm still her. Jamie reached across the table, took her hands in his. They were strong hands, calloused from ranch work, scarred from old injuries. Hands that had killed and healed and loved. You're not just her. You're also the woman who grows vegetables and feeds chickens and holds me at night when I wake up from bad dreams. You're both, and I love both. Even the part that just started a war. We didn't start this. Harden did. You just made sure it didn't end tonight. Kate squeezed his hands, but her expression remained troubled. They sat together as the night deepened, as the fire burned low, as Montana settled into the profound quiet that comes just before dawn. Neither slept. The morning revealed what the darkness had hidden, tracks around the perimeter of their property. Someone had been watching, circling, observing. Jamie found the note pinned to the fence post nearest the road. The paper was expensive, the handwriting educated. It read, "I know the truth about Eli Hardin. Meet me at the old church, alone, tomorrow at dawn. If you want to live." M.P.M. Malcolm Pierce. Jamie stood holding the note as the sun climbed and the valley came alive with morning sounds. Birds, wind, the distant lowing of cattle, all the peaceful sounds of a life that was slipping away like water through fingers. Kate appeared beside him, read over his shoulder. "It's a trap." "Probably." "You're still going." "I have to know what he knows." She was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "Then I'm coming with you." The note says alone. The note doesn't get to decide. We're past that now. Jamie looked at his wife, saw the determination in her eyes, the set of her jaw. She'd put the rifle down once. She'd try to keep it down, but they both knew it would be close at hand from now on. Together then. Always. They stood side by side watching the sun climb over Brennan Ridge, illuminating a valley that had been peaceful for a decade but would not remain so much longer. Somewhere to the south, Cole Hardin was coming. Somewhere in town, Dr. Pierce waited with secrets. Somewhere in the future, violence gathered like storm clouds. But for this moment, for this brief space between heartbeats, they had each other. And in the mathematics of love, sometimes that has to be enough. The abandoned church sat on the northern edge of Brennan Ridge like a broken tooth. Someone had built it 20 years earlier with grand ambitions for a congregation that never materialized. Now the roof sagged, the windows gaped empty, and the wind played songs through gaps in the walls that sounded almost like hymns sung by ghosts. Jamie and Kate arrived at dawn, the sun just beginning to paint the eastern sky in shades of rose and gold. They'd ridden together despite the note's instruction, Kate with the Winchester across her saddle, Jamie unarmed but alert. "I don't like this," Kate said, scanning the empty landscape. Her eyes moved in patterns, checking angles, measuring distances. "Old habits." "Neither do I. But we need to know what Pierce knows." They dismounted 50 yards from the church, left the horses ground-tied in a small copse of cottonwoods. Kate checked the Winchester's load, worked the action once to ensure smooth operation. The metallic sound was sharp in the morning quiet. "If this goes wrong," she said, "it won't. But if it does, don't try to be a hero, just run." Jamie looked at his wife, saw the soldier beneath the rancher's clothes. "I'm not leaving you. Jamie, I've survived a dozen ambushes. You've survived by keeping people alive. Different skills. If shooting starts, you run, and I'll cover you. That's the deal." Before he could argue, a voice called from the church doorway. "Mr. Sullivan, thank you for coming." Dr. Malcolm Pierce stepped into view, hands raised to show they were empty. He looked older in the dawn light, his face lined with something that might have been regret or might have been exhaustion. "You have 60 seconds to explain why we shouldn't assume this is a trap." Kate said, the rifle not quite pointed at Pierce, but close enough to make the threat clear. "Because if I wanted you dead, Mrs. Sullivan, you'd already be dead. I'm a fair shot myself, and I've been watching you approach for 10 minutes. The admission hung in the air. Kate's expression didn't change, but Jamie saw her weight shift slightly, ready to move. "Then talk," Jamie said. "What do you know about Eli Hardin?" Pierce lowered his hands slowly, leaned against the church doorframe. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of confession. "I know he didn't die because your wife shot to kill. I know because I was there. Field Hospital, Sonora region, August 1873. I was a medical apprentice, 24 years old. Still thought war was noble." Jamie felt memory stir fragments of faces and moments from years he'd tried to forget. "You were the boy," he said slowly. "The one who kept asking questions about protocols, about when to fight and when to let go. I was eager, naive. I thought we could save everyone if we just tried hard enough." Pierce's laugh was bitter. "You tried to teach me different. Tried to explain that sometimes the kindest thing a doctor can do is recognize when fighting death only prolongs suffering. I remember now, you couldn't accept it. You argued every time I made a triage decision. Because one of those decisions was my brother." The words fell like stones into still water, ripples spreading outward into understanding. Kate's rifle came up slightly. Your brother, Captain Marcus Webb. Your commanding officer, Mr. Sullivan. The man who led the hospital unit. The man who got gut shot during a raid on our position. Jamie closed his eyes, the memory flooding back with cruel clarity. Captain Webb on the operating table. The wound impossible. Intestines perforated in multiple places. No clean water. No proper instruments. No morphine left after 3 days of continuous casualties. He was dying. Jamie said quietly. The wound was septic. Even if we'd had a proper hospital, the surgery required didn't exist yet. He would have lingered for days, in agony. Pierce nodded. I watched you examine him, watched you do your medical assessment, watched you shake your head, and then I watched you walk outside and speak to a woman I didn't know was your wife yet. I asked Kate to give Marcus peace, a clean death, painless, quick. One shot. I heard it from inside the tent. When I came out, my brother was gone, and you were both just standing there like you'd done something routine, something ordinary. Kate's voice was flat factual. It was routine. 12 times in 2 years, Jamie would come to me. 12 soldiers too far gone to save. I gave them the mercy a doctor couldn't. I hated you for it, Pierce said, and now his voice broke slightly. Both of you. For 10 years, I've hated you. Went to medical school to become better than you. To prove I could save the ones you gave up on. Came to Montana when I heard you were here. Planned to make you suffer. So why are we talking instead of dying? Kate asked. Pierce pulled a folded paper from his coat, held it up. Because 3 months ago, a man named Cole Harden found me. Asked about Eli Harden. I told him everything. The gut wound, the infection, the mercy killing. I thought he'd understand like I finally understood that after years of practicing medicine myself. But he didn't, Jamie said. He didn't care about understanding. He only cared about having a target for his rage. And I realized I just armed a man with the information he needed to destroy you. Not for justice, for revenge. Pierce unfolded the paper, held it out. Kate took it, kept the rifle ready with one hand while she scanned the document. What is this? A geological survey, commissioned by Cole Harden. Your ranch, Mr. Sullivan, sits on top of an untapped silver vein. Conservative estimates put the value at $2 million. Jamie felt the ground shift beneath him, though he hadn't moved. Harden doesn't just want revenge, Pierce continued. He wants your land. The debt he bought the mineral rights, it's all part of a plan. He'll make your life hell until you sell for nothing or leave entirely. Then he'll extract a fortune from beneath your home. Kate lowered the rifle finally, though her expression remained wary. Why tell us this? Why help us now? Pierce was quiet for a long moment, looking past them toward the rising sun. Because I spent 10 years learning to be a doctor, learning when to fight and when to let go, learning that sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same thing. And I realized you already knew that. You knew it when you were 24, and I was too young and stupid to understand. He met Jamie's eyes. My brother would have died in agony if you'd done nothing. You gave him peace. You didn't murder him. You freed him. It took me a decade to understand that mercy and killing aren't always opposites. Jamie felt something tight in his chest loosen slightly. Forgiveness from a source he'd never known he needed. So what now? He asked. Now I help you fight Cole Harden the right way. With the truth. With proof of his fraud. With the law before his version of justice destroys everything. Kate and Jamie exchanged glances. A silent conversation passed between them, the kind possible only after years of partnership. All right, Jamie said, but we do this carefully, legally, no more shooting. Kate didn't quite agree, but she didn't argue either. Small victories. They left the church together, 3 people bound by old ghosts and new purpose. The sun climbed higher, burning off the morning chill. Somewhere to the south, Cole Harden was coming. But for the first time since the letter arrived, Jamie felt like they had a chance. 3 days passed, 3 days of watching the road, 3 days of Kate sleeping with the Winchester beside the bed, 3 days of Jamie reviewing documents Pierce had brought, searching for the legal thread that might unravel Harden's scheme. On the 4th day, the siege began. They came at noon when the sun was high and hot. Not riders this time. Wagons, surveyors, men in proper clothes with proper papers. Behind them, Marshall Reed, his face apologetic, but his duty clear. Jamie and Kate stood on the porch as the caravan approached. 12 men in total. Some carried surveying equipment. Others had rifles but held them casual, unthreatening. Legal. The lead wagon stopped at the gate. A man stepped down, and Jamie knew immediately this was Cole Hardin. He was 40 tall and straight-backed, dressed in clothes that cost more than most men earned in a year. His face was handsome in a hard way, weathered more by purpose than sun. His eyes were gray-cold, calculating. When he looked at Kate, those eyes held recognition and hatred in equal measure. James Sullivan, Catherine Sullivan. His voice was educated Eastern schools and old money. I believe you're expecting me. Marshall Reed rode forward, clearly uncomfortable. Jamie, Kate, Mr. Hardin has legal authorization to conduct mineral surveys on property where he holds subsurface rights. I have to enforce that. Thomas, this is fraud, and you know it, Jamie said. Maybe, but until a court says otherwise, the law is the law. Cole Hardin smiled, the expression not reaching his eyes. The law is a wonderful thing, isn't it? So clean, so civilized. Not like war where people just shoot each other and call it mercy. Kate's hand tightened on the porch rail. Jamie touched her arm gently, a reminder. Not yet. Not here. You want to talk about your brother, Jamie said. Fine. Let's talk. But send your men away first. This is between us. No, Mr. Sullivan. This stopped being between us when your wife pulled the trigger. Now it's business. Legal, proper business. Hardin gestured to his men. They began unloading equipment, setting up a camp just inside the property line. Legally, they had every right. We'll be conducting surveys for the next several weeks, Hardin said, mapping the mineral deposits, drilling test cores, all very loud, very disruptive, but entirely within our rights. You're trying to force us out, Kate said. I'm exercising my legal property rights. If that happens to make your life uncomfortable, well, perhaps you should have thought about that before you killed my brother. Jamie stepped forward, hands up, peaceable. Pierce told you the truth, Hardin. You know what really happened to Eli. It was mercy, not murder. For just a moment, something flickered in Hardin's eyes. Pain, maybe, doubt. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by the cold certainty of rage. You don't get to decide when someone dies. You're not God. No, but I was a doctor who'd seen too many young men die in agony. Your brother didn't have to suffer like that. We made sure he didn't. He was 22 years old, Bo. I know, and I'm sorry he's gone. But the war took him, not us. Hardin's jaw clenched. For a moment, Jamie thought he might actually be getting through. Then the moment passed. You have your version of the truth, Sullivan. I have mine. Let's see which one the law prefers. He turned to his men. Set up the drilling equipment. We start tomorrow at dawn. The crew moved with practiced efficiency, erecting tents, marking survey lines, positioning equipment. All of it precisely on the boundary of what was legal. All of it designed for maximum disruption. Marshall Reed approached the porch, voice low. Jamie, I'm sorry, my hands are tied. Unless you can prove fraud in court, I have to let this happen. How long? He can survey for 60 days under territorial law. After that, he needs to file claims or abandon the rights. 2 months, Jamie. Can you hold out that long? Jamie looked at the men spreading across his property like an infection. 2 months of this. 2 months of noise and intrusion and psychological warfare. We'll manage. Reed rode away, leaving them to watch as Cole Hardin's men turned their peaceful ranch into a battleground disguised as legal procedure. That first night was bearable. The second night, they started the drills. The sound was industrial, mechanical, utterly wrong in the Montana wilderness. Gasoline engines chugging, metal biting stone, men shouting over the noise, and the lights, bright carbide lamps that turned night into day, making sleep impossible. Kate sat in the darkness of their bedroom, the Winchester across her lap, watching lights bob and weave across their property. This is how he wins, she said. Not with bullets, with law, with paperwork, with making our lives so unbearable we leave just to find peace. Jamie stood at the window, exhausted but unable to rest. His eyes burned, his head ached, and somewhere beneath the anger he felt the first whisper of doubt. We won't let him win. How do we fight this? I can't shoot legal papers. Can't aim at surveyors doing their jobs. Pierce is working on proving the fraud. Marshall Reed is documenting everything. We build a case. We beat him in court. Kate laughed, the sound hollow. And how long does that take? How much does it cost? How many nights can we go without sleep before we make mistakes? Jamie didn't have answers. He could only stand and watch his land being violated legally, systematically, professionally. On the third day the community responded, Jamie woke to the sound of wagons and voices. He stumbled to the window, half expecting more of Hardin's men. Instead, he saw neighbors. Sarah Whitmore led them, her son Wyatt driving their wagon. Behind them came Henry Blackwood, the massive farmer from 3 properties over. Mrs. Chen from the general store. The Kowalski family. The Johnsons. 15 families in total gathered at the Sullivan Ranch as the sun climbed over the mountains. Jamie and Kate rushed outside. Sarah met them at the porch, her face determined. Mr. Sullivan, we heard what Cole Hardin is doing. We came to help. Mrs. Whitmore, you can't. This is my fight. Henry Blackwood stepped forward, his voice a rumble like distant thunder. No, sir. This is all our fights. Hardin tried to buy my land last year. When I refused, my barn burned down. Deputy said it was lightning. In December, with snow on the ground. Mrs. Chen spoke up, her accent thick but her meaning clear. He threatened my family too. Say bad men come to town, hurt Chinese people if I not sell my store. I sell. Now I work for man who bought it, make half money. One by one the families shared their stories. Hardin's legal harassment, his careful deniable threats, his systematic acquisition of property through fear and pressure. We didn't fight because we were alone, Sarah said, but we're not alone anymore. You stood up to him, so we stand with you. Wyatt stepped forward, his young face serious. We can help, Mr. Sullivan, even if it's just being here, watching, making sure nothing happens that shouldn't. Jamie felt his throat tighten. He looked at Kate, saw the same emotion in her eyes. Thank you, all of you. But if Hardin sees this as interference, he might come after you next. Let him try, Henry said. 15 families is harder to scare than one. Marshall Reed arrived an hour later, surveyed the gathering with professional assessment. Well, this is interesting. Is it legal, Thomas? Jamie asked. Can they be here? Reed considered. You're on private property. You have the right to invite guests. They're not interfering with Hardin's survey crew, just observing. I don't see a problem. Hardin will. Imagine he will. Cole Hardin rode in shortly after, his face tight with controlled fury. He looked at the gathered families, the wagons, the quiet determination on faces weathered by frontier life. What is this? Marshall Reed answered before Jamie could. Private citizens on private property, exercising their legal right to peaceable assembly. They're interfering with my work. How? They're 50 yards from your equipment. They're not touching anything. They're just watching. Hardin's jaw worked. He looked at Jamie with something close to respect mixed with his hatred. You think this changes anything? You think a crowd of farmers scares me? No, Jamie said quietly, but it means you can't hide behind the law while breaking it. Every person here is a witness. Every illegal action you take, they'll see it. They'll testify to it. I haven't broken any laws. Yet, but we both know you will. And when you do, we'll have proof. The standoff lasted nearly a minute. Hardin staring at Jamie, Jamie staring back. 2 men, 2 philosophies, 2 versions of justice meeting in Montana dust. Finally, Hardin turned his horse. Enjoy your friends, Sullivan. Winter's coming. Let's see how loyal they are when the cold sets in. He rode back to his camp, but Jamie noticed the survey crew worked quieter that day. Fewer unnecessary disturbances. The drills shut down earlier. Small victories, but victories nonetheless. That night, the community shared a meal around a large fire. Simple food, bread and stew, coffee strong enough to float horseshoes. But the warmth wasn't from the fire, it was from the knowledge of not being alone. Kate sat slightly apart, watching the families laugh and talk. Jamie found her there, handed her a cup of coffee. You okay? I spent 10 years trying to be just us. Just you and me in peace. Now all these people are involved. If something happens to them because of me, because of Hardin, not you. I pulled the trigger on Eli Hardin. This started with me. Jamie sat beside her close enough that their shoulders touched. No, this started with war. With a boy who got shot in a place he had no business being fighting for reasons he probably didn't understand. You ended his suffering. Hardin chose to make that into a crusade. Kate leaned against him, and for a moment they were just two people tired and scared and trying to do right in a world that made right difficult. I'm still ready to fight if it comes to it, she said. I know, but I'll try not to start it. I know that too. They sat together as the fire burned low and the community settled into comfortable silence. For one evening, the siege felt manageable, bearable, but they both knew it wouldn't last. 4 days later, Sarah Whitmore's farm burned. The alarm came at midnight, the sound of hoofbeats and shouting. Jamie ran outside to see orange light on the horizon, too bright, too wrong. By the time they arrived, the cabin was fully engulfed. Neighbors were trying to fight the blaze with bucket chains, but the fire had too much head start. The structure was lost. Wyatt ran toward them, his face smeared with soot and tears. Mom's still inside. Jamie didn't think. He shed his coat, soaked his shirt in the water trough, and ran toward the inferno. The heat hit him like a physical blow, poked thick enough to choke, the roar of flames consuming dry wood. He couldn't see, could barely breathe, but he pushed forward. He found Sarah collapsed near the back of the single room, a fallen beam across her legs. The beam wasn't burning yet, but the ceiling above was starting to go. Jamie grabbed Sarah under the arms, planted his feet, and pulled. The beam shifted. Sarah moaned but didn't wake. He pulled again harder, felt something in his back protest but didn't care. The beam moved. Sarah came free. Jamie lifted her in a fireman's carry the same way he'd carried wounded soldiers decades ago and ran for the door. The ceiling came down behind them. Jamie stumbled into the night, his lungs raw, his skin blistered. Kate and Henry caught him before he fell, helped to lower Sarah to the ground. Kate was already working her hands, moving with the efficiency of someone who'd tended battlefield wounds. She checked Sarah's breathing, her pulse. Burned hands moved along Sarah's body, finding injuries. Second-degree burns on her arms and back. Smoke inhalation. But she'll live. Kate's voice was clinical, detached. The soldier reporting casualty status. Jamie collapsed to his knees beside them, coughing so hard his ribs ached. Someone brought water. He drank, coughed more, drank again. Wyatt knelt beside his mother, holding her hand, crying openly. Mr. Sullivan saved her. He ran into the fire. Jamie shook his head, just did what needed doing. Marshal Reed arrived as the cabin collapsed into ash and an ember. He walked the perimeter, studied the ground, examined what remained of the structure's corners. When he returned, his face was grim. Accelerant marks, kerosene, I'd guess, poured along the foundation. This was arson. Hardin, Kate said the name a curse. Maybe, but he's got 20 witnesses who'll swear he was in town all night, playing cards at the Silver Dollar with half the saloon watching. His men, then? Probably, but which ones, and can we prove it? Wyatt stood, his grief transforming into rage. I know who did it. I saw Bram Calder near our place yesterday. He warned me, said accidents happen to people who don't cooperate. Reed wrote this down, but his expression remained doubtful. A warning isn't a confession, and Calder will deny it. Jamie stood slowly, every muscle protesting. He looked at the ruins of Sarah's home, at the frightened families gathered to watch it, Wyatt's face twisted with helpless fury. This has to stop, Thomas, before someone does. I know, but my hands are tied without proof. Wyatt stepped forward, his hands clenched into fists. Then I'll get proof. I'll make them confess. No, Jamie's voice was sharp. You won't. They burned our home, nearly killed my mother. I know, and I'm sorry, but vengeance isn't justice, Wyatt. You go after Hardin's men, you become what they are. You give them exactly the excuse they need to kill you legally. So we do nothing. Jamie put his hand on the boy's shoulder. We do everything, but we do it right. We build a case, we use the law. We don't become the monsters to fight monsters. Wyatt pulled away, his eyes wet. The law isn't working. Then we make it work. But even as Jamie said it, he wondered if he believed it anymore. They took Sarah to the Sullivan Ranch. Kate turned their spare room into a makeshift hospital, treating burns with poultices and keeping Sarah sedated with laudanum. Dr. Pierce came to help, brought proper medical supplies, worked alongside Kate, with the easy coordination of professionals who spoke the same language. Jamie sat with Wyatt on the porch as night deepened toward dawn. The boy stared at nothing, his jaw tight, his hands shaking slightly. My father built that cabin with his own hands. It was all we had left of him. I know. Mr. Sullivan, how did you do it? How did you go through war and come out still believing and doing right? Jamie was quiet for a long time, watching stars wheel overhead in their ancient patterns. I didn't always believe. There were times I wanted to give up, times I wanted to just stop trying to save people and let the world burn. But then I'd look at the person in front of me, the one who needed help right now, and I'd remember why I started. But don't you get tired? Don't you want to just hurt the people who hurt you? Every day. But the moment I do that, I stop being a healer. I become just another person adding to the suffering. And the world has enough of those already. Wyatt was quiet, absorbing this. Then he stood. I'm going to learn. I'm going to learn medicine from you and Dr. Pierce. I'm going to learn to save lives instead of taking them. That's how I'll honor my father, and that's how I'll beat Cole Hardin. Jamie felt pride swell in his chest. You'll make a fine doctor, Wyatt. Thank you, sir. The boy went inside, leaving Jamie alone with the night. But not alone for long. Kate emerged, sat beside him, leaned her head on his shoulder. Sarah will recover. The burns aren't as bad as they could have been. Good. But this isn't sustainable, Jamie. Hardin will keep escalating. Next time someone might die. I know. So what do? Jamie took a deep breath. The answer he'd been avoiding. The choice he'd hoped he wouldn't have to make. Tomorrow I'm going to confront Hardin directly. One last attempt at reason. He'll kill you. Maybe, but I have to try. Kate sat up, turned to face him. In the starlight, her face was beautiful and terrible. Then I'm going with you. Kate, I've been thinking about this, about what Pierce said, about mercy and killing not always being opposites, about doing what needs to be done even when it's hard. She stood, walked to the rail, looked out at their land. If Hardin won't listen to reason, if he keeps hurting innocent people, then maybe it's time to stop trying to reason with him. What are you saying? She turned, and in her eyes, Jamie saw Angel of Sonora, not the rancher's wife, not the woman who tried for a decade to be peaceful, but the soldier, the protector, the one who'd done terrible things for good reasons. I'm saying I'll go to Hardin. I'll offer myself, the person he really wants. I'll trade my life for everyone else's peace. No, it's the logical solution. I killed Eli. Cole wants me. Give him what he wants, and this ends where Jamie stood across the porch, took her shoulders. That's not mercy. That's suicide. Or it's saving everyone else. Isn't that what you taught me? Sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same. Not like this. Never like this. They stood together, two people who'd found peace and watched it slip away, who tried to leave violence behind and found it following them home. Then what's your plan? Kate asked. What's the solution that saves everyone and keeps us all alive and stops Hardin without more blood? Jamie didn't have an answer. For the first time in 10 years, he had no answer at all. They held each other on that porch as the night deepened and the world turned, and somewhere in the darkness, Cole Hardin waited with patience born of rage and resources. Neither of them slept. They simply stood together, taking what comfort they could from proximity, from the simple fact of not being alone. The rest, the how and when, and whether they'd survive, would have to wait for morning. But morning was coming fast, and with it, decisions that couldn't be delayed any longer. Dawn came cold and clear, the kind of morning that promised frost before nightfall. Jamie stood in the barn checking the cinch on his saddle when he heard the sound of approaching horses. Multiple riders. His hand went instinctively to where a gun would have been found. Nothing remembered he'd never carried one. Dr. Malcolm Pierce led them. Marshal Thomas Reed rode beside him. Behind came Henry Blackwood and 3 other ranchers from the community gathering. They dismounted in the yard, their faces serious. Jamie, Kate, Pierce nodded to them both. We need to talk. All of us. They gathered in the Sullivan kitchen, the table barely large enough to accommodate everyone. Kate made coffee, the ritual of hospitality even in crisis. When everyone had a cup, Pierce spread documents across the scarred wood surface. I've spent the last 3 days examining every piece of paper related to Cole Hardin's land acquisitions, the mineral rights, the debt purchases, the survey authorizations. He tapped a specific document. And I found something. Marshall Reed leaned forward. What kind of something? The kind that proves fraud, the bank that sold Kate's paid debt to Hardin. The transaction occurred in July 1883, but according to the bank's own ledgers, Kate's final payment clearing the debt was recorded in November 1882. Jamie felt his pulse quicken. So the bank sold something that didn't exist. Exactly, which means the entire foundation of Hardin's claim is invalid. The mineral rights revert to you. The survey authorization becomes void. Everything he's done here is built on a lie. Henry Blackwood's face split into a grin. Then we've got him. We take this to a judge and Hardin's finished. Not quite that simple, Reed said, his lawman's caution tempering the excitement. We need the original documents, the ones showing Kate's payment and the bank's error. Without physical proof, it's our word against official records. Where are those documents? Kate asked. Pierce looked uncomfortable. In the bank, in the vault. Kate's canceled debt papers are filed there as part of the permanent record. Then we go get them, Jamie said. The bank is closed Sundays. And even if it wasn't, the vault records aren't open to public inspection. We'd need a court order, which requires proving our case first, which requires the documents we're trying to get. Reed shook his head. Classic legal catch. The room fell silent. They'd found the thread that could unravel Hardin's scheme, but it was locked behind walls of procedure and protocol. Kate spoke quietly. What if someone with authorized access went in officially to retrieve property that belongs to them? Reed met her eyes. You mean breaking into the bank? I mean a depositor accessing their own vault box. On a Sunday, when the bank is closed, without the bank manager present. Reed drummed his fingers on the table. That's still breaking and entering, Kate, even if the property is yours. Unless a peace officer was conducting an official inspection, Pierce said slowly, banks are required to allow law enforcement access for security purposes, particularly if there's suspicion of illegal activity. Reed's eyebrows rose. You're suggesting I abuse my authority to conduct an illegal search. I'm suggesting you investigate potential fraud against one of your citizens. If during that investigation evidence happens to be found, that's a hell of a risk. If this goes wrong, I lose my badge. Probably face charges myself. Jamie looked at his old friend, the man who'd served beside him in Mexico, who'd kept order in this territory for 15 years. Thomas, I can't ask you to do this. Reed was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee cup. Then he looked up, and Jamie saw the soldier he'd known decades ago, the man who'd understood that sometimes rules had to bend so justice wouldn't break. You're not asking. I'm offering. That bastard burned a widow's house, threatened families, corrupted the law I'm sworn to uphold. If bending procedure puts him away, then I bend procedure. If we're caught, Kate started, then we're caught together. But we don't get caught. Reed pulled out a key ring, selected one. I have master access to the bank for emergency inspections. Sunday night, 2 in the morning. The whole town will be asleep. We go in, get what we need, get out. Henry stood. What do you need from us? Distraction. If anyone is watching the bank, we need their attention elsewhere. Can you manage that? Leave it to me. Sunday night, there'll be enough activity at the Silver Dollar to keep every eye in town pointed that direction. Pierce gathered his documents. I'll prepare the legal filings. The moment we have proof, I'll ride to Helena, get it in front of the territorial judge. Hardin won't have time to cover his tracks. They discussed details, timing contingencies. The plan was risky, skirting multiple laws, relying on luck as much as planning. But it was a plan, more than they'd had yesterday. As the others prepared to leave, Jamie walked Reed to his horse. Thomas, you don't have to do this. You've got a career, a reputation. I'm not worth losing that. Reed swung into the saddle, looked down at his friend. I've worn this badge for 15 years, Jamie. Seen a lot of men hide behind law while breaking every moral code that matters. If enforcing the letter of the law means ignoring justice, then what's the point? He settled his hat. Besides, you saved my life in Mexico, dug shrapnel out of my back while mortars were landing 30 yards away. I figure I owe you one illegal bank entry. After they'd gone, Kate found Jamie standing in the yard staring toward town. You're worried, aren't you? Terrified but also hopeful. That's new. Jamie turned to her. If this works, it's over. Hardin loses his claim. We get our land back. Life goes back to normal. And if it doesn't work, then we're probably all going to jail. Or worse, Kate took his hand. I've been thinking about what you said, about doing things the right way, about not becoming what we fight. And buy-in, and I'm glad we're trying this first, before I do something we can't take back. She squeezed his hand. But Jamie, if this fails, I'm not letting Hardin win. One way or another, I'll end this. Kate, I know what you'll say, but I've spent 10 years trying to be someone else. If I have to be Angel of Sonora one more time to protect the people I love, then that's who I'll be. Jamie pulled her close, held her tight. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. They stood together as the sun climbed and the world turned and Sunday approached with all its risk and promise. The next 2 days passed in tense anticipation. Cole Hardin's survey crew continued their work, the drilling and measuring and intrusion, a constant reminder of what was at stake. But Jamie noticed something. The crew was quieter now, more careful, as if they knew their time was limited. Saturday evening, Wyatt came running from town, his horse lathered from hard riding. Mr. Sullivan, I was at the general store, overheard Bram Calder talking to 2 other men. They're planning something for tomorrow night. Jamie's stomach dropped. What kind of something? They didn't say exactly, but Calder mentioned the bank, said they needed to make sure certain records stayed buried. Kate appeared from the house, the Winchester in her hands. They know. Somehow Hardin figured out what we're planning. Or he's just being thorough, Jamie said, covering all possibilities. Reed arrived an hour later, heard the news, and swore with impressive creativity. If Hardin's men are watching to the bank, we can't risk the entry. They'll catch us red-handed. Then we don't have a choice, Pierce said. We go to Helena without proof. Try to convince the judge based on circumstantial evidence. Which won't work, Reed said flatly. Hardin's lawyers will tear us apart. They sat in frustrated silence, the plan crumbling before it had even begun. Then Kate spoke. What if we want them to catch us? Everyone turned to stare at her. Explain, Jamie said. Hardin's men are watching for someone trying to steal documents. They're expecting sneaking, hiding. If we go in loud and obvious with legal authority, what can they do? Reed frowned. We don't have legal authority without a warrant. But they don't know that. We go in during the day, Sunday afternoon. I walk into the bank with you as my escort. We're there to access my safety deposit box. Completely legal, completely normal. Except the bank is closed. So you're letting me in as a favor, using your access. Nothing illegal about a marshal helping a citizen retrieve their property. Pierce's eyes lit up. And if Hardin's men confront you, they're interfering with official business. They'll have to back down or attack a peace officer. It's insane, Reed said. Broad daylight, multiple witnesses. If it goes wrong, there's no hiding it. Kate smiled and Jamie saw the soldier in her eyes. Good. Let's stop hiding. Sunday afternoon arrived with unseasonable warmth, as if Montana herself was holding her breath. The town was quiet, most folks at home or church. The bank sat on Main Street, its false front casting shadows across the dusty road. Jamie and Kate approached on foot, Marshal Reed slightly ahead. Pierce waited at the marshal's office with Henry and the others ready to move if needed. Reed unlocked the bank's front door, the sound of the tumblers falling unnaturally loud. They stepped inside. The interior was dim shafts of sunlight cutting through windows, illuminating dust motes that hung suspended in still air. Vault's in the back, Reed said. You know which box, number 42, Jamie's birthday. They walked through the empty bank, footsteps echoing on wooden floors. Everything felt wrong, exposed. Jamie's instincts screamed trap. The vault door stood open, security procedure for closed days. Inside, rows of metal boxes lined the walls. Kate found number 42, used her key. The mechanism clicked. Inside were documents, land deeds, marriage certificate, Jamie's discharge papers from the Army, and beneath them the canceled debt notice dated November 1882, stamped paid in full. Got it, Kate breathed. That's when the lights came on. Cole Hardin stood in the vault doorway, 5 men behind him. His smile was cold triumph. Marshall Reed, Mrs. Sullivan, Mr. Sullivan, breaking into a bank on Sunday. How disappointing. Reed's hand went to his pistol. We're here on official and business, Harden. Step aside. Oh, official business requires a warrant, Marshal. Do you have one? Silence. I thought not. Harden gestured and his men moved to block the exit. Bram, go fetch Deputy Samuel. Tell him we've caught bank robbers in the act. Bram Calder stepped forward, but his movement was wrong. Instead of heading for the door, he turned, drew his pistol and pointed it at Cole Harden. No, she's... The word hung in the air like smoke. Everyone froze. Bram, Harden's voice cracked slightly. What are you doing? Something I should have done weeks ago. Bram's gun didn't waver. Tell your men to step back. Now. You work for me. I work it for money. But there's things money can't buy back, like being able to look at yourself in the mirror. One of Harden's men reached for his weapon. Bram's gun shifted faster than seemed possible. Don't. I'm good at this. Better than you. Better than all of you together. First man who moves gets a bullet. Second man might get me, but first man is definitely dead. Who wants to volunteer? No one moved. Kate had the Winchester up now, covering the men from a different angle. Reed's pistol was out. The vault had become a Mexican standoff, each side armed, each side waiting. Why? Harden asked, Bram, genuine confusion in his voice. I paid you well, treated you fair. You burned a widow's house, threatened a boy, all over something that happened 10 years ago to a kid who was dying anyway. Bram's voice was rough. My old man once told me, there's jobs you take for money and jobs you take for pride. I've been doing the first kind too long. Figure it's time I tried the second. You'll hang for this. Maybe, but at least I'll hang as something other than Cole Harden's dog. The sound of multiple boots on the wooden floor announced new arrivals. But it wasn't Deputy Samuel. Judge Morrison entered the bank flanked by 2 U.S. Marshals. He was 60, white-haired, with the kind of face that had judged too many men and found most wanting. Someone want to explain why I rode 3 days from Helena based on a telegraph about bank fraud? Dr. Pierce appeared behind the judge. Your Honor, I sent that telegraph. I have evidence that Cole Harden acquired property rights through fraudulent means. The proof is in that safety deposit box. The judge looked at the armed standoff sighed the way only a man who'd seen everything could sigh. Everyone put the damn guns down before someone does something stupid. Slowly, carefully, weapons were lowered. The judge gestured to his marshals who moved to separate the groups. Now, Dr. Pierce, show me this evidence. Pierce presented the documents. Kate's canceled debt notice. The bank's ledger showing the payment received. The later deed showing Harden's purchase of that same debt 9 months after it was satisfied. Judge Morrison examined each page with the careful attention of someone who knew legal documents could lie, but numbers rarely did. Mr. Harden, is it true you purchased mineral rights based on this debt? Cole's face had gone pale. I bought in good faith. If there was an error, it's the bank's fault, not mine. Good faith requires due diligence. Did you verify the debt was still active before purchasing? My lawyers handled that. Your lawyers made a mistake, or more likely chose not to look too closely. The judge handed the documents to his marshals. Cole Harden, you're under arrest for fraud, illegal property seizure, and conspiracy to intimidate witnesses. This is ridiculous. I've broken no laws. You've broken several. We'll sort out exactly how many at your trial. Judge Morrison turned to Reed. Marshal, I assume you had a warrant for this inspection. Reed opened his mouth clearly, about to admit the truth, but the judge held up a hand. That was rhetorical, Marshal. I'm assuming you had proper authorization because the alternative creates a great deal of paperwork I don't feel like doing. So let's agree you were acting on credible information from a concerned citizen. Understood. Reed managed not to smile. Understood. Your Honor. The U.S. Marshals took Cole Harden into custody. As they led him out, he looked back at Jamie and Kate. You think this is over? You think destroying me changes what you did to Eli? Jamie stepped forward, his voice quiet but carrying. Your brother died, Cole. Not murdered, not executed. He died from wounds he took in a war none of us wanted to fight. I was the doctor. I examined him. His intestines were shredded. Infection had set in. He would have died in 3 days of the worst agony a human can experience. So you killed him. So I gave him peace, and Kate carried out that mercy because I couldn't. Not murder, mercy. There's a difference. Cole's face twisted. For a moment, Jamie saw past the rage to the grief beneath. A brother mourning a brother, pain finding no outlet except revenge. It's not enough. It's never enough. I know, but it's the truth, and it's all I have to give you. The marshals led Cole away. His footsteps echoed on the wooden floor, then faded into the afternoon sun. The bank emptied slowly. Judge Morrison reviewed paperwork with Pierce. Reed gave statements. Bram Calder sat on a bench, his hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. Jamie approached him. "Why'd you do it?" Bram looked up, his eyes tired. "You really want to know?" "I do. Yesterday I was at the Silver Dollar. Heard you talking to that Whitmore kid. About not letting him become a killer. About how there's already enough people adding to the suffering." Bram rubbed his face. "My old man said something similar when I was about that boy's age. I'd forgotten, or chose to forget. You could have walked away, just left Hardin's employment. Could have, but then you'd still be here with guns pointed at you. And I realized I was tired of being the reason good people suffer." He stood. "I'm not saying I'm good now. I've done things, Mr. Sullivan, things that don't wash off. But maybe this one right thing counts for something. It counts for a lot." Marshal Reed approached. "Bram Calder, I should arrest you for your part in Hardin's schemes." Bram nodded. "I understand." But Judge Morrison pointed out that arresting the star witness against Cole Hardin would be counterproductive. "So instead, I'm deputizing you, temporarily. You'll testify at the trial, help us build the case. After that, we'll see." Bram's eyes widened. "You trust me to wear a badge?" "No, but I trust Jamie's judgment, and he seems to think you're worth saving. Don't make us regret it." They walked out of the bank into afternoon sun. The street was filling now, word spreading that something significant had happened. Townspeople gathered, watching as the U.S. Marshals loaded Cole Hardin into a wagon for transport to Helena. Sarah Whitmore stood with her son, her arms still bandaged but healing. The families who'd gathered at the Sullivan Ranch were there too. Henry Blackwood, Mrs. Chen, the Kowalskis, all of them watching justice imperfect but real being served. Kate stood beside Jamie the Winchester across her shoulders. "Is it really over?" "The legal part is, Hardin's finished. The mineral rights revert to us. We keep the land. And the rest of it, Eli, the past." Jamie watched the wagon pull away, taking Cole Hardin toward whatever justice awaited him. "That's never really over, but maybe we can live with it now, knowing we tried to do right." Kate leaned against him. "I almost lost myself again. Almost became just a soldier. But you didn't. You chose different. That matters. Because you were here, reminding me there was another way." They stood together as the crowd dispersed, as normal life began to creep back into Brennan Ridge. Marshal Reed approached, extending his hand to Jamie. Later that evening, Jamie would learn the full story. The woman Kate had saved 6 months ago, the one who'd ridden desperately through their gate with bullets flying, was Elena Vasquez. She'd witnessed Hardin's men burn a homestead near the territorial border, killing a family who'd refused to sell. She'd been running ever since, carrying testimony that would now add murder charges to Hardin's fraud conviction. The shot Kate fired that January night hadn't just saved one woman. It had preserved the evidence that would bury Cole Hardin forever. That was too close. We could have all ended up in cells. But we didn't, thanks to you risking your career. Thanks to all of us deciding some things matter more than safety." Reed tipped his hat to Kate. "Ma'am, for what it's worth, I'm glad you didn't have to shoot anyone today." "So am I, Marshal. So am I." 3 months passed. Winter came to Montana with snow that turned the world clean and white. The survey equipment was removed from the Sullivan Ranch. Cole Hardin stood trial in Helena, was convicted of fraud and intimidation, sentenced to 15 years in territorial prison. Kate sometimes thought about the count. 48 now, after that January night when she'd protected the fleeing woman. But the number felt different than it had before. 47 kills in war, most of them mercy. 1 kill in defense of the innocent. She was learning slowly that numbers didn't tell the whole story. Context did, intent did. And her intent had always been the same: to end suffering, not to cause it. The morning after the sentencing, Jamie found Kate in the barn tending the horses. She looked different, lighter somehow, as if a weight she'd carried for a decade had finally been lifted. "Heard the news?" he asked. 15 years. He'll be old when he gets out. If he gets out, prison's hard on men who aren't used to it. Kate finished brushing the mare, patted her neck. "Do you think he understands now about Eli?" "Probably not. Understanding takes time. Maybe in 15 years he'll have enough of it." They walked together to the small rise behind the house. Two graves stood there, markers from the ranch's early days. Beside them, a third marker, newer, carved from Montana pine. "Dr. Pierce helped me with the inscription," Jamie said, pointing to the newest marker. "Wanted to make sure we got it right." Kate read the words carved into wood. "In memory of Captain Marcus Webb, U.S. Army Medical Corps, 1841 to 1873. He died in peace. It's a cenotaph," Jamie explained. "His body rests in Mexico, but Pierce wanted somewhere to visit. Somewhere to remember his brother as he truly was, not as anger had made him." Kate touched the marker gently. "A memorial for mercy." Pierce suggested the inscription. Said his brother would have wanted that remembered. Not how he died, but that he died without suffering. They stood in silence, looking at the markers. Two graves and one memorial. Three men touched by war. Three lives that had intersected with theirs in ways that still echoed through the years. "How many others are there?" Kate asked quietly. "How many men did we help leave this world easier than they entered it?" 12, including Eli Hardin. "Do you think they'd forgive us if they could speak?" Jamie considered this. "I think they'd say thank you. Not for killing them, for not letting them die alone and afraid and in agony." Kate knelt, placed her hand on Captain Webb's marker. "Malcolm Pierce spent 10 years hating us. Then he learned to be a doctor and understood why we did what we did. Sometimes understanding only comes through experience." They walked back to the house as snow began to fall. Light flakes at first, then heavier, blanketing the valley in white. Inside the stove radiated warmth. Kate made coffee while Jamie updated the ranch ledgers, recording expenses and income with careful precision. A knock at the door brought them both to attention. Old habits died hard, but it was just Wyatt Whitmore shaking snow from his coat. "Mr. Sullivan, Dr. Pierce says if I'm serious about studying medicine, I should start learning anatomy. He lent me this book." The boy held up a thick medical text, the kind that had cost Jamie a month's pay back when he was learning. "That's generous of him. He said you'd help explain the parts I don't understand, if you have time." Jamie looked at Kate. She nodded, smiling. "Come in, Wyatt. Let's see what you're working with." They spent the afternoon at the kitchen table, Jamie explaining circulatory systems and skeletal structures, Kate adding observations from her years of seeing what bullets did to human bodies. Wyatt absorbed it all with the intensity of youth desperate to understand. By evening, when the boy left for home, Jamie felt something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose beyond survival. A future that involved building rather than defending. "You'll make a good teacher," Kate said. "I never thought I'd get the chance. Always figured the past would catch up before I could do anything meaningful with what I learned." Maybe that's the real victory, not beating Hardin, but getting to live long enough to pass on what we know. They sat together as darkness fell and the snow continued. Somewhere in Helena, Cole Hardin was learning to live in a cell. Somewhere in Brennan Ridge, families were rebuilding and recovering. And here in this small ranch house in Montana Territory, two people who'd done terrible things for good reasons were learning that redemption didn't come all at once, but in small moments of choosing different. 5 years later, spring 1890. Jamie stood in the yard watching Wyatt Whitmore graduate from medical school. The ceremony was held in the small church, the one they'd rebuilt after the old, abandoned one finally collapsed. Sarah Whitmore sat in the front row, tears streaming down her face as her son received his diploma from Dr. Malcolm Pierce, who'd become the formal medical educator for the territory. Kate sat beside Jamie, her hair showing more gray now, but her eyes still sharp, still measuring distances and angles without thinking. She'd never fired the Winchester again after that day in the bank. It hung above their fireplace, now cleaned and oiled but unused, a reminder of who they'd been and who they'd chosen to become. Bram Calder wore a deputy's badge, now permanent appointment, after he'd helped convict not just Cole Hardin, but 3 other land fraud operations across Montana. He'd found purpose in law enforcement the same way some men found religion, something to believe in after years of believing in nothing. Marshal Thomas Reed had retired the previous year, handed his badge to Bram with a simple comment, "You've earned it. Don't waste it." Now Reed spent his days fishing and telling stories about the old days to anyone who'd listen. After the ceremony, the community gathered for a meal. Simple food, but plentiful. The kind of abundance that comes from neighbors helping neighbors from communities that had learned to stand together. Wyatt approached Jamie, his new diploma carefully rolled and tied. "I wanted to thank you, Mr. Sullivan, for everything, for saving my mother, for teaching me, for showing me what it means to heal instead of hurt. You did the work, Wyatt. I just pointed the direction. Still, without you, I'd probably be dead or in prison by now. Anger would have eaten me alive." Jamie thought about Cole Hardin, still 3 years from potential parole, still consumed by rage over a brother dead 17 years. Anger was like poison. Small doses could motivate, but too much destroyed everything it touched. "What will you do now?" Jamie asked. "Dr. Pierce offered me a position as his assistant, but I was thinking maybe I could start a practice out by the Whitmore farm, serve the families too far from town to get regular medical care." "Your father would be proud." Wyatt's eyes glistened. "I hope so, sir. I surely hope so." As evening fell and the celebration wound down, Jamie and Kate walked up the hill behind their ranch. The two graves in the memorial stood weathered but cared for. They'd planted wildflowers around each marker, and now in spring those flowers bloomed bright yellow and purple. "Do you ever regret it?" Kate asked. "The choices we made, the mercy killings." Jamie was quiet for a long time, looking at the graves, thinking about Captain Webb and Eli Hardin and all the others whose suffering they'd ended. "No, I regret the war that made them necessary. I regret the world that puts young men in situations where mercy looks like murder. But the choices themselves, no. We gave them peace when peace was all we had left to give." Kate knelt, pulled a few weeds from around the markers. 47 confirmed. That number haunted me for years, made me feel like a monster. And now I understand. They weren't kills. They were releases. We freed them from pain when no other freedom was possible. She stood, brushed dirt from her hands. "Malcolm Pierce spent a decade hating us before he understood. Cole Hardin might never understand, but I finally do." They stood together as the sun set, painting the Montana sky in shades of gold and crimson. Below them, the ranch sat peaceful. Smoke rose from the chimney. Horses grazed in the pasture. Everything they'd fought to protect was still there, still whole. "I love you," Jamie said. "Have I told you that recently?" Kate smiled. "Not since breakfast." "Terrible oversight on my part." "Forgiven." They walked down the hill hand in hand, two people who'd seen too much death and chosen to spend their remaining years celebrating life. Behind them, the graves stood, silent markers of the past, but not prisoners of it. Inside the house, Kate started dinner, while Jamie reviewed medical texts with notes for Wyatt's education. The Winchester remained above the fireplace, unused but remembered. A tool that had served its purpose and been retired with honor. As darkness settled over Brennan Ridge and stars began to appear in the vast Montana sky, Jamie stood at the window looking out at the land they'd fought to keep. "What are you thinking?" Kate asked from the kitchen. "That we made it. Against odds, against history, against everything that said we couldn't. We made it to the other side." "And what's on the other side?" Jamie turned from the window, looked at his wife in the lamplight, still beautiful, still strong, still the woman who'd saved his life as many times as he'd saved hers. Peace, real peace. Not just the absence of war, but the presence of purpose. Teaching Wyatt, helping neighbors, building something instead of destroying it. Kate came to stand beside him, looked out at the same view. "You know what I realized recently?" "What?" "That number, 47. I used to think it defined me. But for every life I ended, we saved dozens more. The patients you treated while I defended the hospital. The soldiers who survived because we were there. That's the real count, not the deaths, but the lives." Jamie put his arm around her shoulders. "I wish I'd helped you see that sooner. I wasn't ready sooner. Some truths you have to arrive at yourself." They stood together as night deepened and the world settled into sleep. Somewhere in a territorial prison, Cole Hardin dreamed of revenge that would never come. Somewhere in town, Wyatt Whitmore planned a medical practice that would save countless lives. Somewhere in the vast Montana territory, people lived and died and loved and lost the endless cycle of human existence. But here in this small ranch house, two people had found something rare and precious. Not absolution, not forgetting, but understanding that mercy and killing weren't always opposites, that sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing were the same thing, and that redemption wasn't a destination, but a direction. And in the mathematics of love and loss of violence and healing of past and future, that understanding was enough. The last light faded from the western sky. The stars emerged brilliant and cold. And in the warm glow of lamplight, James and Catherine Sullivan began another evening of the life they'd fought so hard to build the peace they'd earned through blood and choice, and the stubborn refusal to let the past define their future. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Always did. But they'd face those together as they'd faced everything else. Not as soldier and medic anymore. Just as two people who'd survived the worst the world could offer and found on the other side that survival itself could be a kind of victory. The night deepened. The fire burned low. And Montana, vast and indifferent and beautiful, continued its ancient rotation beneath stars that had witnessed countless human dramas and would witness countless more. But this particular story, this tale of mercy and violence, of choice and consequence, of two people trying to do right in a world that made right so difficult, this story had reached its end. Not with thunder, not with grand gestures, just with two people, a warm house, and the quiet satisfaction of having lived long enough to understand why they'd done what they'd done and to finally mercifully forgive themselves for it.